What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Offseason Recap. This is a series where I'm going to be going through every single NFL team's offseason, going through analytics, different trades they made, free agent signings, draft picks, their depth chart, and finally, their salary cap table for this year and moving forward. Today, we're going to be talking about the LA Rams, and as you can see on the screen here, probably the best offense in the entire NFL last year. Just all these categories: yards per game, points per game, estimated points added per play, pass yards per game, sacks allowed, play action. Well, we'll get to that. That's not really the same as other stuff, but yeah, this team just offensively was incredible. Had the MVP Matt Stafford, Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, Kyron Williams. Just so much going on with that offense. They were just amazing. Then their offensive line as well played very good. And this is probably going into next year one of the better teams in the entire league. I think the NFC West in general, besides the Cardinals, is probably the best division in football right now. You have the Seahawks, Niners, and Rams. It's going to be a very competitive division. You probably have the best offense in the league, and then the Seahawks are right up there as one of the best defenses in the team. But basically, let's just go through these stats, kind of go a little bit more into what they show us. So obviously, yards per game, points per game, we all know what that means. But basically, EPA, that stands for estimated points added. That's basically a statistic that allows people to understand how much value a team or a specific person adds per play. So, if it's 3rd and 30 and you catch a 15-yard pass, that would usually be good for your stats. But in terms of EPA, that doesn't do anything for you because you're going to end up having to punt. Whereas plays, if you catch a touchdown, if you catch a first down, you run for a first down, throw for a first down, that increases your EPA. So it's a little bit more nuanced. It helps you to actually understand the value of what's coming from people's plays, not just what plays they're making. As you can see, the EPA per pass is great. Just the passing offense was incredible. The offensive line blocking great with the sacks allowed. They weren't allowing a lot of pressure on the quarterback. And then this team, first in play action. What play action means? Basically, quarterback snaps the ball, fakes it to the running back, then they end up passing the ball. Rams are extremely proficient with that, and a lot of the best teams in the league do that a lot. We saw the Seahawks run a lot of that, the Niners as well, the NFC West doing a lot of that. So, a lot of play action from them. Then, interestingly enough, a lot of 13 personnel from them. When you look at this, they're probably the best offense in the league, most passing yards per game, but they're in 13 personnel, the most in the entire league. If you don't know what that means, basically, 11 personnel is the quote-unquote best base offense, that teams run. Basically means one receiver, one one running back, one tight end, 3 receivers. 12 personnel would be one running back, 2 tight ends. 13 personnel, in this case, is 1 running back, 3 tight ends. So, usually you'd go out in that package if you want more run blocking. You're on the goal line, things like that. This team's coming out and they're passing out of 13 personnel, interesting enough. They've just got a ton of tight ends that they use, and they've added another one this year in the second round who we'll talk about a little bit in the video. But just very interesting offense, and they're really kind of spearheading the 13 personnel. Other teams in the league throughout have been using a ton of 12 personnel, really popularizing that. A lot of the best teams in the NFL as well. But the rush offense was very good as well. They weren't getting stuffed. Per game, they were one of the better teams as well, and that also shows, closing out games. If your passing offense is doing this well, at the most yards per game, and then you could close out with a good run game, you're doing good. There's not, we all know, we all watched the NFL this past season. This is probably the best offense in the league. Not much to say there, but where I think they really, what was holding them back to a certain degree was their defense. Don't get me wrong, their defense was very good, but there's definitely some things holding them back there. So yards per game, as you can see, they're about middle of the pack. Not terrible, especially when your offense is putting up so many points. If you're scoring that much and putting up that many yards, obviously the other team's going to get the ball back. Going to be a lot of drives. So, yards per game, not really a complete tell of, how good you're doing, but, it does still matter. Then EPA per play, I think this is where kind of it tells you more context. You see they're 10th in the league, not as much in the middle pack. That kind of tells you, okay, there's yards per game. Those yards are kind of, heightened. They're might not really mean as much. So they're for every play, they're taking away negative 0.18 points from the other team. So that's pretty good. Number 10 in the league. Pass yards per game. Once again, the yards per game doesn't really matter as much. They're putting a ton of pressure on the quarterback, which they added somebody who's very good at that as well. But they were already extremely good at that, 5th in the league in pressure on the quarterback. So very interesting there. EPA per pass as well is pretty good. Sack percentage is good. Once again, their pass rush already pretty good, and they're not blitzing a lot, as you can see, 29th in the league in blitzing. You know, if you could put pressure on the quarterback without blitzing a lot, like teams like the Texans, Broncos, Seahawks, those are kind of like the consensus top 3 defenses in the league. If you can do that without blitzing, and you can have more guys back in coverage, you're going to be able to be one of the best defenses in the entire league. You know, rush defense is pretty good. EPA for rush also pretty good. Amount of 10-yard plus runs, what we would call an explosive run that they allowed, only 39, you know, or actually 39. I think I actually might have messed this statistic up. I think it's supposed to be the other way around. That's kind of a lot. And they're not really stuffing a lot of runs. You know, 11.9%, that basically means any run stopped for no gain or it's a tackle for loss. They're not getting a lot of that. As you can see, 31st in the league. That is not good. Turnover differential wise, 5th in the league, plus 11. Very solid there. Getting pressure on the quarterback on 3rd down at a very high rate, 2nd in the league. Just their entire, you know, 3rd down defense, very good. Red zone defense as well was pretty good. But what I found very interesting was that they ran dime package the most out of anybody in the league. Basically, if you don't know what dime package is, your base defense, your 4-3 or 3-4, you're going to have 4 DBs out there, 2 corners and 2 safeties. In your nickel package, you're going to have 5 DBs, you know, two boundary corners, 2 deep safeties, you know, and then a nickel corner. Dime, you throw out another corner. So you have 6 in total. So you might have 2, or you have 2 boundary, 2 like slot corners, and 2 deep safeties. They ran that the most, which, you know, when you're looking at their stuff percentage, you're like, okay, well, that, you know, that kind of makes sense why that was happening. They were in dime so much. But then you look at like the pass yards per game, if they're in dime so much, it is a little bit weird for the pass yards to be that high. So I think something just to monitor there. But like their run defense isn't terrible. It could be better, but considering they're in dime that much, interesting. And then yeah, I think this defense, especially after the move that we're going to talk about here in just a second, took a very big step up. But I think now you have probably the best offense. Your defense is continuing to grow. Still got a lot of young people there, looking very good for them moving forward. Now let's move on to the trades. We'll start with this one down here. Trading for Trent McDuffie for a 1st round pick, which turned into Peter Woods, 5th round this year, 6th round this year, and then a 3rd next year. They took Trent McDuffie from the Chiefs and they made him the highest paid corner in the league. That's interesting. You also then you go up here. We'll just kind of we'll talk about it in a little bit. But you know, then you trade for Myles Garrett. You have Jared Verse, 1st, 2nd, 3rd. Now Myles Garrett is one of the highest paid defensive ends in the league. Okay, it's getting interesting. You've also got Puka Nacua, who is going to be up for contract, which we'll talk about that a little bit more later in the video. He's probably going to be one of, if not the highest paid receiver in the league. Okay, we've got a lot of money going out. Getting a little ahead of myself, but just kind of to preface what we're going to talk about in the video. But they're getting paid what they should be. This is probably the best. No, this is the best defender in the league in Myles Garrett, but definitely the best pass rusher. And then Trent McDuffie is just such a dynamic, such a versatile, amazing corner. They had, you know, 2 of the best players at their positions. Just incredible what they were able to pull off. And, you know, they throw around a lot of draft capital, which, you know, it could pay off if they end up winning a Super Bowl. Nothing else matters. That's what you come here to do in the NFL. If you win a Super Bowl, it doesn't matter how much draft capital you give up, doesn't matter how much money you paid. As long as you're winning, everything else is fine. I think both these trades, I think a lot of people would agree, were wins for them. You know, obviously more stuff will have to pan out. Like if these guys, obviously, if they blow up and they don't play good and you're paying them all this money, obviously it's not going to be a good trade. But, you know, I think we all can agree that adding just 2 players of this caliber, you do that in a heartbeat. You know, losing Jared Verse does kind of suck. He played very well with them, only 25 years old, just extremely powerful guy, still on a cheap contract. You know, I think a lot of fans liked him. Me, even as a Seahawks fan, I was a big Jared Verse fan coming out of the draft. And then, you know, seeing him on the Rams really sucked because I really liked him. But I think the Browns had a very good player with him that they can develop him. Fits more in their timeline, especially with how much they're paying him because their payroll is pretty high and they're not going to be very good. So, think it makes sense for both teams. And I have a video out talking about the Myles Garrett trade and AJ Brown trade on this channel. So if you want to go check that out, get some more in-depth talk about those two trades, some analytics about the specific players like Myles Garrett, Jared Verse, and then AJ Brown. Go into some more depth on them specifically. Yeah, so if you want to check those out, watch that after this video. But yeah, two trades that I think make a lot of sense, and I think they pretty much win. Let's move on to the free agents. So, as you can see, Myles Garrett, they had him via trade, but then Jalen Watson, I guess they're just the LA Chiefs, maybe? I don't know. Adding their entire cornerback room, basically. Bringing Jalen Watson to play with Trent McDuffie. Jalen Watson's a very good player. 6'2", about 200 pounds, boundary corner. But a very solid player with the Chiefs. They paid him quite a bit of money, too. It says overpay. I kind of disagree with that. But paying a lot of money to him. Very good corner, though. Like, they're adding a lot of pieces to this secondary. I think it's a very good signing for them. Trent McDuffie. They're bringing Grant Stewart, some depth, special teams, whatever. Joe Cardona could be their new long snapper. Sure. Players they lost, Jared Verse, obviously. Roger McCreary, who they bring in, used to be on the Titans. Basically, I believe a slot corner, let him go. Kelly Witherspoon, who's been coming into the league, he was a very good player, but so many injuries, kind of fell off a little bit, let him go. Darian Kendrick, who they cut before the season started, he ended up on the Seahawks and played pretty good for them, then ended up back on the Rams. Solid player, goes to the Cowboys. They lose Nick Hampton, Kobe Durant, Tutu Atwell, who actually has been a pretty productive player for them, providing some pretty explosive plays, but nothing of too much substance here in the players lost. Obviously, Jared Verse, but that's a little bit different. But, they didn't lose a ton in particular here. And people they re-signed, Cameron Curl, gave him a solid size contract. A solid safety for them. They're really filling out the secondary. I know this is a re-sign, but this secondary is looking very good. Tyler Higbee they bring back, $3 million. They love their tight ends. David Questenberry they bring back to be a swing tackle. Justin Diedish they bring back. Xavier Smith, who might return some kicks for them. Harrison Mevis to kick, and then Ronnie Rivers as the third, maybe fourth, see if he makes the team running back, and then Kerr Thomas they bring back. So not a ton going on in free agency outside of Jalen Watson. They didn't really lose anybody crazy. I mean, their main moves came through re-signing people, making trades, and then in the draft, of course, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. But I think, this was a team that was already good. They were in the NFC Championship. They played the Seahawks, who ended up winning the Super Bowl, and they gave them a good game. They were competitive. This team, you could have, if they went and just ran it back, drafted some people, supplemented with a couple free agents here just as depth pieces, I don't think anybody would have batted an eye on that. I think, I wouldn't have been surprised if that happened, but you also wouldn't be surprised if they go out and they make a splash like this with Myles Garrett, considering that Matthew Stafford's getting up there in age, and your window's kind of closing with a bunch of guys you're going to have to extend a lot of money as well. Who we'll get to that in a little bit. We'll talk about them. Puka Nacua, Byron Young. Talk about those implications a little bit, but I think your window, not closing, but we're not going to be paying a ton of people a ton of money. I think going out and getting Myles Garrett and Jalen Watson while you have cap, deferring stuff to, later, I think that makes a lot of sense. I love what they did in free agency and trades and stuff. You add the best defensive player in the league. You bring in a bunch of secondary depth. Love what they did. Let's move on to the draft. Ty Simpson. It was questionable when it happened. Not a lot of people saw it coming to a certain degree. I know a lot of people kind of talked about it, but was it really going to happen? I personally didn't think so. I didn't really think it made a lot of sense, especially at 13. If they maybe traded down, it would have made some more sense. But now I feel like it's even more questionable, which I talked about this as well in the video I made on the trades. But, if you knew, that you might be targeting a guy like Myles Garrett, which obviously I don't know if they were, but you just traded for Trent McDuffie, if you were buying all in now, why use that 13th overall pick, on Ty Simpson when you could have maybe used that in a trade, or you could have maybe drafted somebody who could have been a contributor now? It does make some sense, because how many times are you going to be up this high to get a quarterback who you think can be the guy of the future? But, if you're going to buy all in one area, give up all your future draft picks, dish out a ton of money, but then you're also going to buy into this younger quarterback and try to develop him, I don't know how it really works to really develop him and give him a good situation to succeed in the 2, 3, maybe even 4 years, probably not 4 years, but when Matt Stafford's gone. If you don't have draft picks to supplement on this team, are you really going to give Ty Simpson a good chance to develop anyways? Obviously guys like Puka Nacua will probably be there. They'll probably still have a lot of core pieces still there. It is just, I have questions. I'm not saying it was the wrong thing to do. I'm not saying that it makes no sense. It was a little confusing, and obviously they had a plan. They know what they're doing. It'd be good for somebody in that room to actually explain it to everybody, because we all could throw out theories, but it's very confusing as to why they did that. But Ty Simpson as a player, very solid footwork, very fluid player. Not a ton of arm talent. A lot of times it looked like he would throw his entire body into throws, but it just seems like a very, very competent, very fluid quarterback, with good athleticism, kind of like a Brock Purdy, which people might not be excited to hear that. They might be excited to hear that. I don't know. It's up to you. But I think he's kind of that, which I've talked about this in previous videos, game manager, which is becoming a buzzword. What is a game manager? Is Matt Stafford a game manager because he sits in the pocket? No. Brock Purdy, I guess, is a game manager, but he's getting paid $50 million. He's making all these plays. Team's been competitive. Is he a game manager? I don't even know what a game manager is anymore. So that's for you to define, but he's going to be in that kind of role with good athleticism, can extend the play. He's not Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen, but he's just going to get the ball out on time. And don't get me wrong, he's got to develop a lot. There's a lot of things in his game where they're just not clicking yet. He's just not ready. But he's going to have time to develop under Matt Stafford. And I think he could definitely be a very solid starting quarterback in this league. And moving on to Max Clare, they needed more tight ends. I don't know why last year they had 4 tight ends who were very good. They had Higbee, Parkinson, Terrence Ferguson from Oregon, who they drafted in the second round last year, I believe, or maybe 2 years ago, I forget. But yeah, I think it was last year. Then you also have Davis Allen. So you had 4 tight ends already who were very solid players. And you go ahead and spend a second round pick on one, which Max Clare, very solid player, pretty solid athlete, very good pass catcher, very good after the catch. I really like what he could do at the NFL level. I think he could fit into this offense very well. But at one point, do you have enough tight ends? I don't know. I guess maybe will they roster 5? I don't know. Maybe they will. Are we going to see the first ever? I guess maybe not first ever, but 0-5 personnel. That would be something. We get 5 tight ends out. Can you even do that? Yeah, you could. You'd have five offensive linemen, quarterback. That's 6, and then 5 tight ends. That would be 11 guys. So you can do that. I guess that would be interesting. I don't know what that would look like, but I guess that's possible. Yeah, Max Clare, pretty solid player. 6'5", 240, solid athlete, good after the catch. Very solid route runner. I think he's got a lot of room to develop and be good in this offense. Then Keegan Trost from Missouri. I believe 7-year player. He's 25 now, which I believe he turned 25 in April, if I'm not mistaken. So a bit of an older player. He's bounced around from, I believe he was with Indiana State, I think it was. And then he ended up transferring to Missouri, now. He's played a couple of games at left tackle, mainly right tackle, but he's 6'5", 311, I believe 32-inch arms, so his arms are a little bit on the shorter side. He's got very good athleticism. This is a guy who I think can definitely be a swing tackle. Could plug and play at either one of those if somebody gets hurt. But I think as like a true starter, he might be more profiled as a guard, especially with he's got very good athleticism. I really like what he looks like, but it's hard to tell when you have guys who are 25, and they might be playing against somebody who's 20, like a 5-year difference. Like, how much strength you could put on in 5 years, or how much more you could develop, mentally. So there's a lot of, nuance to that, but very solid athlete. He's got all, the measurables to be a good guard, I think. So yeah, I like that pick in the 3rd round. No problem with that. CJ Daniels from Miami. Pretty solid player, very good at contested catch, very good at the catch point. Made a lot of great plays. I don't know if anybody remembers, but in the Miami versus Notre Dame game, there was a catch he made. It was a one-handed catch where the safety just stood behind him and just watched him make the catch. I don't know if anybody remembers that. That was hard to watch as a Notre Dame fan, which I am. That was that was something. But yeah, very solid player. About 4.5 speed, 6'2", so a bigger guy. Not a ton after the catch. I think he does have some chops. They actually ran him on quite a few screens, but interesting player. They don't have like a solidified wide receiver 3. It's kind of Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua. Those 2 guys, Puka Nacua is definitely their best player. But then after that's like Jordan Whittington, and there's not a ton there, so he could definitely compete to be in that wide receiver 3 spot maybe. But if he's not in that and he doesn't win that out, he's gonna have to show out on special teams. He wants to make the team, but solid player. I think he could definitely play a role as long as he makes a team. Tim Keenan, very he's an okay player. 6'1", but smaller, but very compact, like 327. I think he came out at the combine. Shorter arms, like 30-inch arms. Not the most explosive guy. He's kind of slow, for lack of a better term. He's not really fleet-footed, but he could really, as a 0 tech or 1 tech, he could take up some space, take up some blockers in the run game, and he could be a rotational guy in that role. He could definitely get out on goal line, take up some blockers. I don't think he's really got a ton of like penetrating power and a lot of disruption. Literally just getting in there, and he's so like compact where he's really hard to move. He might not push the other guy back too much, but he's not really getting pushed back, even if he's getting double teamed. But I don't think there's a ton of pass rush upside. I think he's strictly like a run defender. Although, watching some of his clips today, just to refresh myself, there was something there with his ability on stunts, because somebody who's like that compact and that that big, when you run into like a 6'7", 300-pound tackle, and you hit them lower, you just kind of throw their body into them, it does throw them back a little bit. So there's something to be said about that, even though he's not the most like explosive guy. When he gets moving, even though it's not that fast, and he throws himself, on a stunt to throw the tackle out of the way so the edge can come on inside, and beat the guard. There's something there. I don't think that's really the most efficient thing, and he's not great at it, but there is something there. So maybe a little bit of upside there, but he's gonna have to fight to make the team. They've got some other players at that position. We'll see what happens with him. But I think overall it's a draft class, only having 5 picks. It's hard to really say how well they did, because their first round pick is not going to play for the first, however many years. But as a developmental piece, I like what they could do with that. Max Clare, solid player. I like him as a player. But, how is he going to get on the field when they have so many tight ends? Is there going to be a rotation of tight ends? Like, are they going to have 13 personnel and just completely swap into another group of tight ends on the next play for 13 personnel? I don't know. But very interesting player. Like how they could develop him. Keegan Schross, I think, is a very solid depth piece. Maybe a starting guard at one point. CJ Daniels can maybe contribute this year, maybe in the future. He's also a little bit older. I think he's about 25. I think he turned, maybe is he 24? I'm not sure. I think his birthday is in January, so not sure if he's 24 or 25, but he's also a bit of an older rookie. But yeah, he might be able to compete now to contribute, and then Tim Keenan also might be able to contribute. So I think it's a solid draft class, but we definitely have to see how they use these guys over the next 3 years, and we might not know if this is a good or a horrific draft class for that amount of time. But yeah, I like it. I think it's pretty solid. Moving on to their depth chart. So offensively, there's a lot going on. So Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua, like the net receiver, I don't know who's going to end up winning, this wide receiver 3 spot. I think they're going to be a lot of 12, 13 personnel. Jordan Whittington from Texas, solid player. Kanata Mumfield, solid player. CJ Daniels, they drafted. We'll see what he can do. Xavier Smith's more of like a kick returner. Tyler Scott, I think he's more of a kick returner. So I'm not sure what's going to go on with that. Maybe you see him pick up a veteran or something. Maybe somebody gets cut when they shorten down the rosters come the regular season. But yeah, I'm not sure what's going to go on with that. The offensive line, I think, is very solid. Larry Jackson's good. Steve Avila is good. Coleman Shelton's good. Kevin Dotson, good. Warren McClendon, on a cheap contract, really showed out last year. Very good player. So their offensive line is very solid. And then the tight ends, here it is. Colby Parkinson, Tyler Higbee, Terrence Ferguson, Max Clare, then Davis Allen, who actually played for them quite a bit. It's all the way down here. He's listed as, was it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? He's listed as their 6th tight end. I don't know. I mean, I think he's definitely better than these two, or this guy, and probably this guy, because Max Clare hasn't played yet, but Davis Allen has played, and he's shown that he can actually contribute. So how many tight ends are they going to roster? I don't know. Teams usually roster 3. If they have a fullback, it might be 4. The Seahawks last year, a little bit of an outlier. They ended up rostering basically, 4 tight ends, if you want to call it that. They rostered AJ Barner, Elijah Arroyo, Eric Sauber, Nick Callerup, and then they rostered 2 fullbacks in Robbie Utes and Brady Russell. So, maybe the Rams are following that. I roster all the tight ends. We don't need any other positions. Let's just do that. But yeah, tons of tight ends there. I like what they've got in that room. Matthew Stafford, MVP from last year, one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Great there. Then a running back, Kyron Williams from Notre Dame, very solid player. Blake Corum from Michigan, very solid player. Ronnie Rivers, they brought back, and Jarquez Hunter, the rookie from last year. Solid running back room. I think this offense is very solid. We've talked about it earlier. I think this is probably, go into this season, this is probably, the best offense in the league, just what we've seen in the past. Then the defense. This is where I think they're going to have to step up if they want to be a true, well, not true contender. They are a true contender, but if they, to be in the Super Bowl and to win the Super Bowl, this defense is going to have to play a little bit better than they did last year. And I think, they definitely can. The defensive line, I really like Braden Fisk, very solid player. I wonder how he feels about Jared Verse getting traded. I'm sure it's not, an issue, but, I'm sure he'd rather play with his friend. Poona Ford, love Poona Ford. He's such a fun player. One of those, shorter, compact guys like Tim Keenan, but unlike Tim Keenan, he's got longer arms, so he can really just destroy the leverage battle. Being smaller, if he's going up against a taller offensive lineman, say somebody who's 6'5", and he's 6 foot or 6'1", I'm not sure exactly what he is, and he's got these long arms, and he just drives you up, you can't get to him. Very fun player. Kobe Turner, very good pass rusher, really like him as well. And then his depth as well. Tyler Davis, solid player, rotational player for them last year, but Ty Hamilton, nose tackle, pretty solid disruption. This is a very deep room. Tim Keenan's got a lot of work out for him to get back on this roster, and they brought back Larry Murchison. They re-signed him, so a lot of depth in this defensive line room. Really like what they've got going on there. And then we haven't even talked about their pass rushers yet. Byron Young, Myles Garrett, Josiah Stewart. Those are 3 very solid pass rushers. Byron Young, one of the premier speed rushers in the league. Myles Garrett, the best defender in the league. Josiah Stewart, rookie from last year from Michigan. Shorter arms are really explosive, very good speed off the edge. I think he's a very solid third pass rusher for them. So this pass rush and the interior defensive line and these edge rushers, very good. And then, linebacker, I kind of thought that they might address that at some point in the draft. They didn't. Omar Speights at times looked a little lost. Nate Landman was pretty good for them last year, but Omar Speights, I think, especially in the Super Bowl as well, I think he got juked out by Kenneth Walker. Just ridiculous. So I thought that they might add some more at linebacker, but if that's your only, which we got to get to more, but if that's your only real quote unquote weak spot, I think you're okay. Then in the secondary, Jalen Watson, Trey McDuffie as your boundary corners. Love that. Very solid players. Then the slot, Quentin Lake, and I'd say Cam Crow, Cam Kitchens. Just secondary's good, defensive line's good, edge rushers are good. They've got a lot going for them here. Even their depth is pretty solid too. Emmanuel Forbes is interesting. There's a couple game stretch where he looked like a great corner and then just fell off. You don't remember him, a former first-round pick from the Commanders, but he was like 160 coming out. Very, very weird player. But they've got some other depth in this room. There's a lot going on here, and I think this defense could even match the offensive production from them last year. I think the Rams are definitely a true contender. One thing I do want to talk about is kick returning and punt returning. Xavier Smith, once he makes the team, probably be there. Then returning kicks, I would assume Xavier Smith would also be in there. But I was looking at it. I'm not sure if they have any true game-breaking returners, which I think we're kind of starting to see people and teams move into seeing returning as a much more valuable piece. If you watch any Seahawks football, when they brought in Rashid Shaheed, he started returning kicks and punts. You really saw the value that he played. On kickoffs, they wouldn't even kick to them. They just kick it out of bounds, kick it out of the end zone, and they got at the ball at the 35, which is huge. So if teams aren't even willing to kick to your kick returner, that gives you such good field position. I don't really see any amazing returners on this team, which we saw a lot of other teams with great offensive minds like Sean McVay. Like Ben Johnson was one that really reached for a guy, Savion Thomas, who's going to be a very good return man. I'm kind of surprised they didn't do that. I think that might have been what they would have done, but anyway, that's not the biggest problem. But this team as a whole, very solid, like what they've done. Let's move on to their cap, which this is where I have the most questions. Obviously they've got one of the best teams in the league, and you're gonna have to pay a lot of money to have one of the best teams in the league. But I do have some serious questions about what this team is going to do going forward. Really quickly, see these orange years here. Basically, those are void years. In the NFL, when they give out contracts, there's 2 separate parts of the contract. You have the signing bonus and you have the base salary. The signing bonus is stretched out. So obviously think of it, you think signing bonus, okay, you get that right when you're signing, which the player does. But in order to count against the cap, it's spread out. So let's say you sign a 4-year contract with a $20 million signing bonus. That signing bonus will be, $5 million over 4 years. So it'll be spread out. So the team doesn't have to take on that much money in that first year. But then teams can also spread that out even further with void years. That basically just spreads the money outside of the contract. So if you sign a 2-year deal, you could add a void year and basically spread the signing bonus over 3 years rather than 2. So it gives you a little bit more money to work with, gives you more flexibility. As you can see, they have some money on Matthew Stafford and Davante Adams in void years, as well as Myles Garrett down there. What happens with void years when the contract expires? So as you can see for Davante Adams in 27 and then Matthew Stafford in 28 here. If the team doesn't re-sign them, that money accelerates to that year, so it'd be 2027 for Davante Adams. If he had multiple years here, let's say he had another $4 million in 2028, all that money would accelerate to 2027, so it'd just be $8 million in dead cap. That causes some problems for teams, because if you don't have the player on your roster, dead cap. Also, if they extended Davante Adams to 2027, this $4 million should be added onto whatever the extension is. So if they gave him 1 year $10 million, it would actually be 1 year $14 million. So just a disclaimer about that. But back to their money situation. Matthew Stafford signed an extension. Next year's not bad. But these void years, if they don't bring him back, this all accelerates to 2028. That's a lot of dead money they're going to have to deal with. Davante Adams, $4 million in void years, not terrible, but he's going to be gone next year. Larry Jackson, they're under for a solid contract. They might want to get an extension done with him. Kevin Dotson, expiring contract. They might want to get an extension done with him. Quentin Lake, they just re-signed. Kyren Williams, they've re-signed. Poona Ford, getting a little bit up there in age, but they're paying a lot. Trent McDuffie, they made him the highest paid corner in the entire league. Very large contract. Coleman Shelton, their center, expiring contract. Colby Parkinson, expiring contract. The Myles Garrett contract. They restructured his contract. I believe it's 5 years, $204 million. So I believe this first year he's getting paid about $37 million, I think it was. But his contract over this entire thing is going to get expensive, especially if the void years stay the same. He's 31. If he plays out the entire 5-year contract and he plays until 2030, he would be 36 years old. If he retires before that, all the void money, all the dead money would be pretty severe. Then you look, Cameron Curley just extended, Nate Landman they've extended, Jalen Watson they just got a bag to, and you get to this right here. This is what I'm most worried about for this team. Byron Young and Puka Nacua are going to be up for massive contract extensions. Also, guys like Steve Avila, Kobe Turner, those 4 guys are going to get paid. And if you're paying a bunch of other people money, it could cause a problem. I'm not saying that this is a problem you want to have. You want to have a ton of great players. You want to draft really well and then have to dish out a ton of money. Because then you could also get compensatory picks. If they let a guy, say they let Steve Avila walk, we'll just pick him out, and he goes and he gets paid a ton of money in free agency, they could get a compensatory pick for him. So, it's a good problem to have, but it is a problem that has to be addressed, and we should talk about it. Byron Young could be asking for like the $30 million range. Top receivers in the league like Puka Nacua are going to be asking for $40+ million. Steve Avila is a solid guard, maybe 15 to 20 million. We'll see. Kobe Turner, solid interior defensive lineman. He might be asking for closer to 30. So they might have to dish out some money here. Warren McClendon, who's played solid for them, he might need an extension. So just a lot of money that might have to get dished out when they're already paying a lot of guys up here quite a bit of money. That is something I think that we should talk about. But if I was a Rams fan, don't worry about that. That's tomorrow's problem. Worry about, you have one of the best teams roster-wise on paper in the entire league. Your team's ready to go now, and it's still ready to go, a year from now, even 2 years from now. You've got so much good talent coming in. You may not have a ton of draft picks, but you already have so much talent on this team, and then you could supplement that back with compensatory picks, maybe make some other trades and stuff like that. This team is, not done great with early picks, but, guys in the later rounds like Puka Nacua they found as a gem, they've been solid with that. So overall, I think I would give this Rams off-season A+. You bring in 2 of the best defenders at their position. You extend Matthew Stafford for next year. Draft is a little bit questionable, but, we won't know for the draft for another 3 years if it worked out. So who am I to say if it's bad or not? Anyway, great offseason for them. Definitely a contender for the Super Bowl. That entire NFC West division is going to be something. But anyway, thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, comment. And yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.